Hello, welcome to Apocalyptic Literature, Religion 490. It's an online course. I wanted to make this instructional first video for the course to kind of give you a heads up on the books you're going to be reading, how this course is going to be laid out, and what you can expect. If you're watching this, you probably looked at the syllabus. You know who I am. I'm Dr. Anderson. And what I'm going to be doing this semester with you is I'm going to be taking you through the wonderful world of apocalyptic literature. And what you're going to need, and I'm looking at the syllabus right now, and hopefully you can follow along. What you're going to need, obviously, is a fairly good study Bible. I would recommend, because you can't do Greek or Hebrew, I would recommend either the English Standard Version or the New Revised Standard Version. The NASB might be okay too. But basically you're going to want to get a serious version for this class. Also, as you can tell on the syllabus, I actually tell you some of the specific biblical passages and books that we're going to be looking at. And I'll say a word about those in a little bit, but you can kind of see them there. It starts with stuff in Daniel, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Joel, Zechariah, a lot of Old Testament stuff. And then, obviously, there's a couple passages in the Synoptic Gospels, that's Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And then, obviously, the Book of Revelation is the big one. But in addition to that, we're not just going to focus on strictly biblical texts. We're also going to focus on some Jewish apocalyptic literature texts. And that includes, and I have the books for you, well, you have to get them yourself. You have this one, it's the Book of Enoch. It can be a bear at times, but it's kind of an important thing to grasp. Basically, the Book of Enoch is a collection of apocalyptic texts from probably the intertestamental period of Judaism. What is the intertestamental period? It's just like it sounds, intertestamental. It's the time period between the close of the Old Testament and the first century. So, 2nd, 3rd century BC. We'll be looking at that at one point in the course. Also, we're going to be looking at 4th Ezra and 2nd Baruch. These are also Jewish apocalyptic literature texts that date pretty much parallel to the first century Christian literature. So if you want to think of the Book of Revelation, it was written at the end of the first century. These things were written kind of right around that time or a little later. So that's another thing you're going to be working your way through. And I'll tell you right now, since you're going to be obviously unfamiliar with them, these can be kind of difficult. And that's one of the reasons why I'm going to try to make sure I give you some fairly regular video snippets and classes, if you will, to help you get through that stuff. So those are two books you're going to be looking at in addition to the Bible. Also, there are two other books I'm going to have you read that will act as a good way to get into apocalyptic literature. The first one is by Stephen Cook, called The Apocalyptic Literature. I think this is going to be one of the first things we look at, and this will give you a needed background material on what it is, and if you look at the table of contents, it talks about a lot of academic stuff. And this could be a hard read at times, but again, I'm going to help you through it and walk you through it. If you want to get to the academic knowledge of apocalyptic literature, you're going to have to kind of dive deep and go with it. The final book you're going to be looking at deals specifically with the Book of Revelation, so you won't get to this one until later on in the course. It's called Comfort and Protest by Alan Bosek, The Apocalypse from a South African's Perspective. Alan Bosek was a South African Christian under apartheid, and basically this is a mini commentary on the Book of Revelation and what his interpretation and how to read the Book of Revelation. This is probably one of my favorite books on the Book of Revelation. Came across this 20 years ago and I still like it. So those are the four books you're going to be using in addition to the actual biblical text. As well, there's another recommended text. We're not going to deal with it specifically, but you can buy it on Amazon, probably used fairly cheaply. It's called Prophecy in the Apocalyptic Dream by D.S. Russell. And as you can tell, it's a fairly thin book. This is also a very good book to understand what apocalyptic literature is. And it goes into detail, quite a lot in the Book of Revelation as well. The only reason I don't have this as a required text is because it's not really in print anymore, and you have to go on Amazon and find it used, and I can't expect you to get it. But if you can get this, I would highly recommend getting this. This is really good, and it's not that hard to read. Unlike some of the books you're going to be reading can be tough sledding, but this one is just easy to read, and it's really good. So I would recommend this as well. There might be a few other books I recommend along the way, but that's what it's going to be. Now, this course specifically is 3 credit hours. We're going to go through this semester. And basically, what we're going to do is I'm going to try to help you trace the evolution of apocalyptic literature. We're going to find out what it is, what are the characteristics of apocalyptic literature. Spoiler alert, Left Behind series, Tim LaHaye, not what apocalyptic literature is. So, just in case you're wondering. But in any case, if I was going to summarize it very quickly, apocalyptic, that's a hard word to say. Apocalyptic literature grew out of the Old Testament prophetic movement. And that's why we're going to start, after some initial background stuff, we're going to start with some of the stuff in Isaiah, actually. Basically, when you look at the Old Testament prophets, there are parts of the prophets that look forward to a time when God would right all the wrongs in this corrupt age, this corrupt world, and that he would put an end to sin and death and evil rulers and elevate his people and vindicate his people. Now, that's throughout all the prophets all the time on a very immediate historical level. When you read the prophets in context, that comes across. But there are passages in which the prophets get a lot more cosmic. They talk about the heavens and the earth, rolling up and the stars falling from the heavens and, really big, catastrophic kind of cosmic imagery. And those are very interesting. They're almost precursors to apocalyptic literature. And basically, as we'll find out, those are the texts that look forward to the ultimate end of when God is going to redeem and recreate all of creation, not just immediate things in history, but ultimately. And therefore, the only way to express that hope is to use big cosmic language, okay? Now, obviously, if you know the history of Israel, they go into exile in 587 BC because of their sin. They break the covenant. And about 70 years later, they come out of the exile, and there's a whole bunch of prophecies at that time that they're going to come back to the promised land, and they're going to have a king, and the temple's going to be rebuilt, and God's going to pour out his spirit on them, and the end will come, and all the promises will finally happen. And they were expecting that. Unfortunately, not all of that really happened. The time after the exile, as they came back to the land, but they never got their king back. They were always under the thumb of a foreign ruler. They had rebuilt the temple, but it wasn't that great. And there was conflicts within the people itself. And so in the intertestamental time, some Jews look back at some of the Old Testament prophecies that were very cosmic in their expectation of God righting all the wrongs and ushering in the new golden age. They looked at those prophecies, and from those prophecies that hadn't seemed to be fulfilled yet, some Jewish intertestamental period writers developed a new genre of writing that we call apocalyptic literature. And in it, they try to address the seeming unfulfillment of some of these prophecies. And that's what apocalyptic literature seeks to address. It looks back on some of those prophecies and tries to interpret them and reimagine them to what's really going on in the world. And so, and when they do that, there's, as we'll get to this, next time, there's a number of specific literary characteristics that apocalyptic literature has. It's a distinct genre of literature that was written in that intertestamental time and into the first century or so of the Christian era. And so we'll talk about that in my next video, maybe in the end of the week. But that's what we're dealing with when we're dealing with apocalyptic literature. You have to read it in its historical context, what brought it about, and then once you understand that, then you have to understand the actual way it's written and what is going on in apocalyptic literature. They were trying to address things at that time that they failed to understand. And again, we'll be getting into that a little later. But back to the syllabus. As you can see, there's the course description. I kind of rambled on a bit just now about what the course description is. You could read the course objectives on your own. That's pretty straightforward. The way the course is going to be set up is obviously there's going to be assignments throughout the semester that you do, and they'll be due on certain dates. In addition, I'm going to have set up discussion boards for each book or so, or each section of scripture that we look at, with some questions that hopefully you as the students and me together will discuss some aspects of apocalyptic literature, and you'll get a better handle on it. I mean, it's one thing to read the books and answer the questions that I give you, but when you enter into a discussion about what texts mean, that's where you really get a handle on what apocalyptic literature is and what the individual passages really mean. It's one thing to just answer questions. You really need to wrestle with it and talk about it and discuss it. So you're going to have some discussion boards and some group discussions going on throughout the semester on various topics. There's going to be 2 exams. One is going to come after modules 1 and 2, and that's going to be like the midterm. Then another one after modules 3 through 5, that's going to be kind of like a final. And we'll talk about what the modules are in a second. But you're going to have 2 exams, discussion boards, and then various assignments that you'll get to take you through all the material. And that'll unfold on Canvas with each module. And by the way, what I'm going to do is with each module, once the time period for the module opens up, I'll open up all the assignments for that module so you can do that stuff on your own time. That's why you're taking this as a online course, so you have a little more freedom. And you'll just have that entire module to get that stuff done. But then once that module closes and I'll open up another module, then you'll have all the time to do the second module. The final thing you're going to do is a creative paper. It'll be fun. Basically, because our modern world is kind of obsessed with a lot of apocalyptic imagery, we see this in movies and stories and stuff. And I was a literature major, so I like to see some interdisciplinary cross academic lines. One thing I'm going to have you do at the end of the semester is, once you have a handle on what apocalyptic literature is and how it functions and what it addresses, I'm going to ask you to think about perhaps a movie or a story in popular culture that is kind of apocalyptic, and I want you to creatively tell me about it and analyze it according to the rules and genre of apocalyptic literature. As you can see, it's, I want you to discuss the apocalyptic themes and imagery in a modern movie or modern literature. It's kind of a fun thing to do. I'll tell you right now, when I was in graduate school, I kind of did this a little bit by reading some apocalyptic themes in Terminator 2. So that was kind of fun. I mean, you really learn it more when you are able to apply it to something that you know in the here and now. All right. So that's what the course is going to be set up as. That's what you're going to go through. 5 modules, various assignments in each module, going through the scripture passages in the books, group discussions, and then 2 exams and a creative paper at the end. I'm not going to read everything in the syllabus right now. You'll see it. But I'm going to skip down to the grading scale. It's going to be fairly simple. The grading scale is 90 to 100, A, 80, B, just like that. And as far as the percentages of everything, you can kind of see it right there. The creative paper is going to be 10% of your grade. The midterm for exam number 1 is 15%. Exam number 2 is 15%. The discussion boards, I want you to take part in the discussion boards. As long as you do those, that's 20% of your grade. So as long as you take part in them, boom, easy. And then the assignments themselves will be about 40% of your grade. So you total that together, that's 100%. It spreads the grading throughout a number of things. So even if you falter in one area, you'll have all these other areas to back yourself up on. And then finally, you'll see the modules, how I'm going to set it up. The first module is going to be some introductory things. It's going to be primarily going through a big chunk of this book right from the beginning. And then once you get that, we're going to go through those passages, those Old Testament passages, specifically in detail. We're going to learn about what they're saying and how to interpret them. And that'll take, I think, 2 or 3 weeks. And then Module 2 is all about the Book of Enoch. You might see Enoch 1 through 108. That's a lot. Most of these chapters are really thin, but still, I mean, it's a long, it's a long thing. So we'll go through that. Module 3, we're going to deal mostly with everything in the New Testament that is not the Book of Revelation. You'll see there's a main passage in Matthew, Mark, and Luke called the Olivet Discourse. As well as Matthew 25. There might be a few other passages that we look at. Parts of 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, Paul's letter. 1 Peter and Jude actually make allusions to apocalyptic literature. I think Jude actually alludes to Enoch itself. It's kind of interesting. So we'll look at that in Module 3. Module 4, we're going to go into the Jewish apocalyptic literature of the 1st century, which is 4th Ezra and 2nd Baruch. And then we're going to top it off with the Book of Revelation. And we'll have to spend almost a month on that, because that's just fun. That's what most people are familiar with. So that is what we're going to do. And then if you look on the syllabus, you'll see the calendar due dates and stuff. I've kind of spaced out when I want things due. And just, you follow that pattern, you follow the course, and we'll be good to go. So the first thing that you're going to be doing by Saturday, and the due dates will say, at midnight that day. So I have for Saturday the 24th, the first 2 chapters in the Apocalyptic Literature book. Boom. There'll be questions for there. Have that uploaded on Canvas by midnight of the 24th, which is just turns into the 25th. We'll do that, and we'll go from there. And like I said, I'm going to try to give a video class at least once a week. Maybe a little more at the beginning just to get everything started. But we'll go from there. So for now, what you want to do, just kick right off, get into the Apocalyptic Literature book, read the first 2 chapters, have it in by Saturday, and then just keep checking back regularly, take the class throughout the semester, and we will get through apocalyptic literature, and I think you're going to find it pretty interesting, and we will go from there. Yeah, everything else should be quite self-explanatory, and that's what we're going to do. Be looking for, the more I think about it right now, be looking for a second video, maybe later in the week, where I kind of spell out some of the really basic things of apocalyptic literature in my own words. And then we'll touch upon the first 2 chapters as well, and I'll kind of get you into it, get you on firm footing. All right, thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed the class. Thanks.